Hello and welcome back to Project 380. The Mark II is back in the garage after Fest 2025, and in this video we're going to be delving into what went wrong on track. So to start things off, the day before Fest I had an issue with the exhaust manifold, the turbo and the wastegate. Now I thought I had sorted those problems, but apparently they came back. So all was going well, I wasn't quite hitting the boost that we set it at, and 4 or 5 laps in it started sounding a bit strange. And for some reason I carried on anyway. So let's take a closer look into the car and see what damage has been done. So first off, right down the back here near the downpipe, I found this little bit of metal which looks exactly like an exhaust manifold gasket part. So that's going to be a little souvenir for me. The next thing we noticed right down there is all the paint flaking off of the engine bay. Definitely not a good sign. That has completely peeled off the frame. And then right back there we noticed some melted wiring. Definitely not a good sign, and I'm very surprised the engine still runs. And then someone pointed out my dipstick, which has completely melted. So we know it definitely got hot around this area, and I think I've had a small fire. The wastegate definitely isn't the right colour anymore. That has seen some serious heat. When the car's running, it definitely sounds like there's a manifold leak, if not a turbo or downpipe leak, and it's just sounding generally rough. So considering this is the first time in 10 years the car has been pushed hard, I'm quite surprised nothing more serious went wrong. A little exhaust leak, a little burnt wiring, and possibly a little fire. I don't think it's too bad. The most important thing is the car still runs, and I drove it into the garage. So I think it's time to start stripping down the turbo, the exhaust and the exhaust manifold and see what's really gone on. Let's start off by getting the screamer pipe off and out the way. I don't know whether the camera's going to pick this up, but that V-band is now shaped like a Pringle, so that's going to have to be changed. This turbo blanket is feeling rather crispy, so let's take that off and see what's underneath. That's not good. So it looks good from this side, but this is exactly why you don't buy cheap turbo blankets. Maybe it's this that caught fire. There is so much fiberglass absolutely everywhere now. I think I'm actually going to have to get the Hoover on the engine bay before I go any further. Everything's just glittery now. The spring that held that turbo blanket on, look at the state of it now. I don't know whether we can see in there, but that is definitely a gap between the turbo manifold and the turbo. So maybe I had 2 exhaust leaks, one from there, and one, by the looks of it, from the turbo manifold there. I think it's time to get the downpipe and the turbo off the car. So I forgot I've got a bracing bracket for the downpipe on the gearbox down there, which is not going to allow me to get anything else off. So I'll go underneath in a minute and do that. I'm going to try take some other things off, like the wastegate, the intercooler pipe, and I'm going to start undoing the manifold bolts. Okay, well that wastegate is not coming off. That's going to have to come off when I take the manifold off. So I'm going to undo what I can up here and then jack the car up and undo that downpipe bracket. Right, ready?
Ready.
I think I know what the problem was. That is all I've got left of the turbo gasket. The rest is gone. Look, you can see, move that. Can you see that? It's nice and clean there and really sooty there. So it's just been escaping out of there. Well, it's not going to come off. Okay, damage report time. I think I've done a little bit more damage than I first anticipated, but nothing too dramatic. Everything is replaceable or savable. No terminal engine damage, and no drastic wiring damage. So the bay's looking a little bit empty right now. The turbo, the manifold, and all the heater lines around here are all gone. As you can see, all the paint is flaking off the bay here. It's pretty burnt and crispy. So this section's definitely going to need repainting. The paint on the strut brace, that seems to be okay. My two vacuum reference lines that go to the engine, they seem to be absolutely fine. This brake line has taken a little bit of heat, but that's fine. The manifold face on the block, that seems to be completely fine. The dipstick is obviously melted, I need to replace that, but the dipstick tube is fine, just a little bit discoloured. All the rest of the wiring back there seems fine. But the coil sub-harness, well, that's seen better days, but I needed to remake this anyway. The two heater lines that were connected here, because they were wrapped in the Funkmotorsports heat wrap, they are absolutely fine. They haven't taken any damage whatsoever. The coolant line that was coming off the bottom of the water housing down here and up to the turbo, well, that definitely needs replacing. And that definitely deserves some heat proofing. The external wastegate has definitely seen better days, but we'll get back onto this in a minute. The exhaust manifold gasket, which I thought was the problem, is absolutely fine. No signs of leaking at all, but this is what's left of the gasket to go from the manifold to the turbo. That has seen better days and definitely due an upgrade. I think one of the problems is this is single layer stainless steel and just isn't up to the job. The turbo itself is absolutely fine. The V-band on the screamer pipe has definitely seen better days, so I'm going to have to cut that off and weld a new one on. Now, this cheap turbo blanket, that has definitely seen the last of its days. I'm not sure whether this was actually doing anything, but this is why you don't buy cheap turbo blankets. Last but not least, the turbo manifold. The manifold to head face seems absolutely fine. But as you can see, the manifold to turbo face is not okay. You can see where it's sealed at the front end and not sealed at all halfway down and towards the back. And two of the studs have come out. Also, the catch can that was right above the little fire, absolutely fine. So the plan now is to get that turbo manifold to my friend who's got a little machine shop in his garage. We're going to make sure both mating surfaces of that turbo manifold are nice, flat and true. And potentially look into some upgraded gaskets. We might have to go the route of making some thick copper gaskets, but I'll discuss that further with him and see what route we go down. The engine bay itself, this whole area down here needs repainting and the rest just needs a good clean up. Because I've taken those coolant lines off, there's coolant everywhere and I've flooded the garage again. I need to remake this coil harness, which I needed to do anyway. Remake the turbo coolant line, weld a new V-band on the screamer, potentially replace the wastegate, and sort out some better heat management. As if I ever have a gasket blow again, I don't want to cause a small fire. So first off, while I'm waiting for some parts to arrive, I'm going to sort this bay out. So unfortunately a couple of weeks have passed, and the bay is painted again as best as I could do without removing absolutely everything. That's one problem sorted, but now I've developed more problems. So Matty, my tuner, popped round the other night, and while I was doing stuff in the engine bay, he took my old wastegate apart. And that is looking pretty sorry for itself. Definitely not pinky purple anymore, it's sort of burnt. The diaphragm inside the wastegate, that is completely perished. That may have got a little bit too hot. And the actual wastegate itself, that is completely seized. So Matty dropped me off at one of his old wastegates, hoping that I can salvage some parts from it, but the diaphragm is completely different. This wastegate is also bent, so that is two completely useless wastegates. So I'm going to have to order a brand new external wastegate. Not ideal, but these things happen. Now the next problem. I popped the exhaust manifold to my friend Shane's last night. He's got a little machine shop in his garage, and I went over there in the hope to flatten my exhaust manifold. So the manifold to turbo flange is pretty flat. We can see we've got a little low spot here, over here, and a little bit on this edge, but nothing too major. This is now as flat as we could get it. The manifold to head flange, that is absolutely fine. I'm quite surprised, as I thought that was the problem, but all along it was just this. Now, the wastegate flange is a different situation. That too is warped, and we can't take off any more material without machining this. And me and Shane decided that just wasn't worth the effort, so I'm going to have to cut that V-band off right there and weld a new one on. And that's the only way we're going to get that true, flat and proper. The same with my Pringle shaped screamer pipe. I'm going to have to cut that V-band off and weld a new one on as well, which means I've got to take off all this heat wrap. So I've got a lot of cutting and a lot of welding to do. I'm going to put the camera down now and just concentrate on getting that done. And I'll see you in a minute, hopefully with two new V-bands welded on. So that is a nice new V-band welded onto the turbo manifold. And because the original V-band was warped, I couldn't get the new V-band in exactly the right place, which unfortunately for me means I had to reconstruct the bottom end of the screamer pipe with all new pie cuts just to move this V-band over just a few millimeters. But with that all done, I now need to re-wrap this in some Funkmotorsports heat wrapping. Now with all the screamer pipe re-wrapped, it's time to disassemble everything, as it's just in there for now just to mock up the screamer pipe, clean everything up and start applying some heat proofing. So that's all off now, and I've put a couple of pipes back in. And the first pipe I'm going to replace is the oil drain for the turbo. I'm not sure how this hasn't melted worse, but it's only just started melting there, so I best make a new pipe. New oil drain all made. Now I need to put some heat protectant on it to protect it from the manifold. So to protect that oil return pipe, I have gone for some Torx fiberglass heat-proof sleeving. I think that looks pretty good, so let's cut this to length and put it on that return pipe. So I've cut that to length, and that can simply slide on that return pipe. That looks really good, and hopefully it will protect it from the heat. Now this could go back on the car. Not that you can see, but it is on there and looking pretty good. Just a little bit of tape on the end to protect anything from going inside it. Now on to the next pipe to remake, and that is the coolant line for the turbo that comes off the back of the water housing there, beside the turbo manifold and up and to the turbo, which has really seen better days. The braiding has completely melted away, and there's no flex to this pipe anymore. That really needs replacing. A nice new pipe with new ends on it and some Torx sleeving. Hopefully that won't melt again. That water pipe's on there now. Onto some more heat proofing. As you can see, I've wrapped the oil feed pipe with some of the Funkmotorsports Velcro heat wrap. I'm hoping once this is all together, this is going to look real nice. But for this bit of heat wrapping, I'm going to protect this water feed to the turbo. This heat sleeving, you literally wrap around the pipe and Velcro on. And you can simply cut it to length with a really good pair of scissors. With some of the heat proofing on now, it's time to get the turbo manifold reinstalled on the engine with a nice new multi-layer steel gasket. As you can see, I haven't changed the manifold studs. As we found out, this gasket wasn't the problem, so I'm not going to change them, as they seem to hold up just fine. The turbo manifold is back in its rightful home, and as you can see, I'm not using the copper nuts anymore. I'm actually using some stainless steel aerotight nuts. They are a locking nut, unlike a nylock which will melt under heat. Because these are all stainless steel, there's nothing to melt. So hopefully they'll do a pretty good job of keeping the turbo manifold on the engine. And as you can see, I have heat wrapped the manifold which I am definitely not in a rush to do again. But hopefully that will keep some heat out of the bay, and I was a little bit concerned about this front runner here, as it was so close to the charge pipes. So hopefully that will reduce my intake temperatures a little bit, but that is a subject for another time. With the turbo manifold back on now, I'm going to go on a little side quest and replace my coil harness. This needed replacing anyway, as I did have a couple of these plugs fail, which of course was my own fault. And for some reason when I made this harness, I didn't put any heat sheathing down here, and it all started to melt. So that whole thing could be chucked in the bin. And I've made myself a new coil sub harness. Heat-proofing everywhere this time. I have got a little bit extra of the gold wrap. I might put that down here just to protect it a little bit further. So I'm going to install that on the engine now, just so I'm not leaning over the turbo. And I tug tested every single wire, so hopefully no issues this time. But the coil sub harness is all back in and connected. I've also gone ahead and slid the downpipe in, as with the turbo on it is a bit of a pain to get down there. And now it's time to put the wastegate on. So the old tile wastegate is completely cooked. The diaphragm completely melted, and the actual gate completely stuck. Now this is a tile wastegate and was pretty expensive, but now it's complete trash. Now I'm sure you can appreciate getting the car on the road, taking it to Silverstone and melting it was pretty expensive. So I hate to say it, but I've gone for a China wastegate. Before you even think about throwing hate in the comments section, consider sending me a branded wastegate first. Right now I just want the car back on the road and making boost, and if I have to buy a China wastegate to do that, I'm going to. But before I put this on the car, this needs a bit of heat protection as well. So I've got a wastegate blanket from Funkmotorsports. Hopefully this will do the job. Now this can only go on one way. As you can see, this opening is smaller, this one is bigger. The bigger opening towards the manifold. Make sure it's tucked under there neatly, and then you can secure it with the securing wire provided. And then loop it over the top to the other wire support round the back. And then cut off the excess if there is any. That's ready to go on the car. That's just loosely on there for now, but I think the purple of the China wastegate and the gold of the Funk jacket go really well together. Now onto the turbo. As you can see, I've already got studs installed. That wasn't the plan. I actually ordered some Inconel studs weeks ago and they haven't turned up. Lost in the post. So I've just got some high tensile ones for now. Now onto a gasket. I am actually going for a 4-layer stainless gasket. That could go on there. Now I was debating what gasket to go for a very long time. People were saying a Nissan gasket, triple layer stainless steel, and some people were saying copper. Now here's why I went for a 4-layer stainless steel one. Now that the manifold's flat and I've stoned the casting of the turbo flat, both mating surfaces are flat. So I should only need a standard gasket. Now I think this whole problem is all caused by me, and I'll happily admit that. Now these CX Racing turbo exhaust manifolds do not come with an external wastegate. I welded that on myself, and when I welded that on, I didn't bolt anything to that turbo flange, meaning when I welded that on, the turbo flange just went like a banana. So really, I was doomed from the start, and it was all my fault. So hopefully a 4-layer stainless steel gasket does the trick. And what doesn't help is that I used the gasket that the turbo came with, which is just a single layer of stainless steel. It's not really even a gasket. So fingers crossed and pray for my engine bay, but I'm pretty confident this 4-layer gasket will do the trick. Now let's put a turbo on. That's the hot side of the turbo all on now. Again, that is secured with some aerotight nuts. The downpipe's on, the screamer pipe's on, and the wastegate's in position. I have decided to put the turbo on in sections, so just the hot side's on for now. So I've just got to put the rest of the turbo on. I'm not sure whether I'm going to regret this decision or whether I've made my life easier, but we'll see. Time for the rest of the turbo. I regret nothing. That was loads easier. I managed to get that oil return with ease. Managed to get it in position and do up all the nuts. That is definitely the way to do it in the future. Just the cold side housing left to go, and then I'll plumb the turbo core up. That's the cold side of the turbo all on now. That was definitely easier to strip the turbo down and install it in parts. It's all plumbed up now with some new lines, but I have changed this heat proofing on this coolant line around the front from the gold Funkmotorsports one to the Torx one. The gold sleeving on this pipe just crunched up a little bit and didn't look that pleasant. The gold looks good on a straight, but bunches up on a tight bend, whereas this Torx one, yes, it's not gold and shiny, but it looks really good on a tight bend. So I may change this gold in the future, but we'll see how both of these do for now. Now it's time to ditch this old cheap turbo blanket, which clearly isn't working. So much fiberglass in the air. To a proper quality turbo blanket from Funkmotorsports. This isn't sponsored, I just had to buy it. I'm sure you've all seen the videos of these online. But let's hope this one does a far better job. Now that looks a lot better. It is significantly thicker than the old one, so I'm hoping I don't have any clearance issues here. And with the turbo all plumbed in, the springs that hold this jacket on underneath the turbo, each side, are a bit of a pain to get on. But what I found best was to hook the springs on the jacket one side, put a couple of tie wraps in the other side of the spring, feed the tie wraps and the spring underneath the turbo, pull on the tie wraps and then hook it on the other side of the jacket. And then you can simply slide the tie wrap off the spring. But I am really happy with that. All I've got left to do is put on the catch can, plumb that in, get the car back on the floor and fill it up with coolant, as most of the coolant is on the floor. So the car is back on the floor now. The catch can is in and I've put a little bit of heat protectant on them AN10 hoses. The car is filled up with coolant, been left overnight and there is no coolant on the floor, so that's a bonus. But there's one last thing to do before I start this car back up, and that is to get rid of that old melted dipstick. That's pretty bad. Luckily I have got a spare dipstick. Even though it's got a broken end, at least it's not melted. Time to start it up and check for leaks. Well, that didn't exactly go to plan. The wastegate was leaking ever so slightly. That was actually a fault with the wastegate. The gate and the sealing ring didn't quite meet, so I took all the wastegate back off, ground it down like you would a valve in the head, and it all seems to be fine now. I heat cycled the engine a few times, letting it get quite hot, cooling all the way down and checking all the nuts and bolts. And everything seems to be fine. But then for some reason out of nowhere I got a fuel leak from an AN hose. So I was over here checking the wastegate and I could see a little drip from that fitting there. Luckily not the hardest to change, but it was still a bit of a pain. And it just so happens to be it was one of the only AN fittings on the fuel system which wasn't a Torx fitting. So that's all solved now. With everything hopefully fixed, it's now time for another road tune. When me and Matty road tuned it way before Silverstone, we were running into boost issues, which obviously now we know what the boost issue is. The exhaust gas is leaking before the turbo. I've now got a re-road tune it. Now that I haven't got that leak, it's now going to try and make more boost than it was before, which obviously could go really wrong. Now there's a reason I'm road tuning it and not sending it to a dyno, but that's going to be a separate video very soon. So while I'm waiting for Matty, I'm going to be changing all of these stainless bolts, which if you use a black Allen key in, rust anyway. I'm going to be changing them to some black stainless bolts, which my friend James gave me and said these will look better. And I think he's right. I've already started changing them in the body panels and they do look a lot better than the shiny stainless. So thank you James for the bolts, you were right. So I've just got to wait for Matty to be available to road tune my car and then hopefully I could go enjoy it for a while. So that's all for this video. Make sure you go check out the Funkmotorsports website and the Torx store for everything I've used on the car today. As per usual, don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one where hopefully this is running and driving and I'm enjoying it.